Rivers in South Brazil are rising as flood and rescue efforts continue. At least 147 people have been killed and more than 800 injured in the deluge, while rescuers are searching for 127 people reported missing. President Lula da Silva said that the authorities were not prepared for a disaster of such a magnitude. More than 600,000 people have been displaced by heavy rains, flooding and mudslides that have ravaged the southern Rio Grande do Sul state for about 2 weeks. Hundreds of cities and towns and part of the regional capital, Porto Alegre, city of 1.4 million inhabitants, have been underwater for days, with streets turned into waterways. Some 80,000 people have found refuge in schools, sports clubs, and other buildings that have been turned into makeshift shelters.
The water never went down. I had that in October and this one now. I lost everything this time.
The state remained paralyzed with some 360,000 students not in school. The international airport is shut and numerous roads and bridges are underwater or have been swept away. Many farms are also submerged in a region that produces more than 2/3 of the rice consumed in Brazil. The federal government has said that it would import 200,000 tons of rice in guarantee supplies and preempt price speculation. The president announced that he wants to suspend Rio Grande do Sul's debt payments to the state for 3 years. Brazil's federal government last week pledged some $10 billion for reconstruction. The floods are the latest weather extreme to hit Brazil, following record-breaking forest fires, unprecedented heat waves, and drought. The government and experts have attributed it to the El Nino weather phenomena exacerbated by climate change.
Cities need to perceive and understand themselves as an ecological system. We have to associate ourselves with the organization of this system, so we cannot go against nature. We have to adjust and adapt to the forces of nature.
Moving on, the death toll for flash floods and the coal lava flow from a volcano in western Indonesia over the weekend has risen to 50, with 27 more missing. The flood swept away people and submerged hundreds of houses and buildings by forcing more than 3,100 to flee to temporary government shelters. Our next report tells you more.
Search and rescue operations continue in Indonesia's West Sumatra province on Monday after deadly flash floods and mudslides. Dozens were killed over the weekend, authorities said, while rescuers carried on searching for missing people. 400 personnel, including rescuers, police, and military, have been deployed, helped by at least 8 excavators and drones. Torrential rain on Saturday evening triggered floods, landslides, and cold lava flow in 3 districts in the province. The cold lava flow is a mud-like mixture of volcanic ash, rock debris, and water. It came from Mount Merapi, one of Sumatra's most active volcanoes. In December, more than 20 people were killed after Merapi erupted. A series of eruptions has followed since. In Agam district, over 150 people were evacuated to nearby schools.
The flooding was sudden and obviously the river became blocked, which resulted in the flow of water everywhere. It was out of control.
Almost 200 houses were damaged in the floods, and a large area of land, including rice fields, were affected, according to the National Disaster and Management Agency, BNPB.
Since the 2016 Paris Agreement, where nations pledged to curb climate change, a troubling reality has emerged. A new report reveals a stark gap between promises and actions. The world's biggest banks have funneled nearly $7 trillion towards the fossil fuel industry, the very industry driving global warming. This financing has not just sustained fossil fuels, but fueled their expansion. Half of this funding has gone directly to new explorations and extraction projects. The result? Leading climate scientists now warn of a potential 2.5 degrees Celsius rise in global temperatures, a scenario with devastating consequences. The report dives deeper, analyzing the top financiers of fossil fuels. U.S. banks lead the pack, contributing 30% of the total funding in 2023. Among them, JP Morgan Chase stands out, having provided $40.8 billion to fossil fuel companies in the same year. Europe contributes a quarter of the total, with Barclays leading the region at $24.2 billion. Interestingly, even after joining the Net Zero Banking Alliance in 2023, many of these banks continued substantial financing of fossil fuels, raising questions about their commitment to climate action. The report's methodology, relying on data from financial market companies, has faced some criticism. Critics argue that complex loan structures and the lack of distinction between financing for new projects and transition technologies make it difficult to pinpoint specific responsibilities. However, the overall picture remains clear. Indigenous communities disproportionately impacted by climate change voice their outrage. They see their lands targeted for fossil fuel extraction, calling it a sacrifice zone for corporate profits. The report concludes with a call for transparency and a shift towards truly sustainable energy solutions. Whether banks will heed this call remains a critical question for the future of our planet. Moving on, one of the year's first major wildfires in Canada are closing in on the British Columbia town of Fort Nelson, as thousands of people across the nation are forced to flee advancing blazes. The Pacific Coast Province's emergency management minister said that 4,700 people were evacuated from the remote town, as well as a nearby Indigenous community. Authorities have been bracing for another possibly devastating wildfire season after Canada's worst ever wildfire last year saw flames burning from coast to coast and charring more than 15 million hectares of land. British Columbia has opened multiple emergency reception centers and booked hundreds of hotel rooms for displaced residents. Across the province, 137 wildfires, including 14 burning out of control, are active. In neighboring Alberta, authorities said that crews and helicopters were battling 45 active fires, including 2 out of control. Meanwhile, in Manitoba province, officials said a fast-moving 35,000-hectare fire near Flin Flon in the north has forced the evacuation of 550 people over the weekend. After the blaze surged in size, Federal Emergency Preparedness Minister Harjit Sajjan on social media X called the Manitoba fire deeply concerning. Hazy conditions also blanketed parts of 5 U.S. states. Plumes of smoke from the Canadian wildfires have triggered air quality alerts in Montana, North and South Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency issued an air quality alert in response to a band of very heavy smoke from wildfires in northeast British Columbia. The air quality index showed conditions across the states ranging from moderate to unhealthy for the general public.
Season started again.
Now, to know more about extreme weather conditions across the world, we are being joined by WION The World. He is the chairman of the Worldview International Foundation and former UN director. Now, Worldview is an international foundation aiming to plant 1 billion mangroves by 2030. Thank you for joining us. Now, I would like to begin by asking, we see heat waves in Asia. At the meantime, we see floods in Kenya and in Brazil. Do you think there is a relation between heat waves and floods?
Yes, unfortunately there are, because and the reason is that when it gets warmer, more rain is or water is evaporating up in the atmosphere. And for each centigrade it gets warmer, the atmosphere can hold 7% more water. And this water comes normally down as flush rain. And that's why we see this. And then it moves away, so it doesn't necessarily come down at the same place where it is evaporated. But there is a very close connection, yes.
Now, is there a possibility that these extreme conditions will continue in the coming years now that you've mentioned that the rising temperatures are the cause of these?
It's not a possibility. It will happen. Just a week ago, there was a survey made by The Guardian, and they asked 843 scientists that is member of the International Panel for Climate Change. And more than 50% of these scientists said that they expected a warming more than 3 centigrades. It is, we are going into a very, very dangerous period. We humans, we are very intelligent, but we are not very wise, because the cost of this apocalyptic development is 6 times higher than if we decided that we would prevent the warming as of now. So the extreme weather will increase a lot, and we will see an ice-free Arctic in the middle of September. There will be millions of refugees if it goes like the way the scientists are saying, 3 centigrades warming. Cities like Shanghai, Miami, and Rio will be underwater. It is unbelievable what kind of trouble we are going into, and we know we are doing it, and we don't do what is needed.
Yes. Now, every year we have the climate summit, and we have so many countries coming up, and they have a due date for climate goals, and somehow every next year it seems to be extending. So, considering the Earth and the timeline, how much timeline do you think Earth actually has, considering that we keep on extending the deadline?
Well, I can tell you exactly what is needed according to the scientists. Should we manage to stop the warming on 1.5 degrees, which is the goals that all these governments has agreed upon. Number one, we have to reduce emissions by 2030, it's 6 years, from fossil fuel with 50%. If we look into the plans of the fossil fuel industry, they will not reduce with 50%, they will increase by 20%. And that is why we are going towards 3 centigrades or more. At the same time, part of the solution is that we need to triple the production of renewable energy, because there is a need for more energy. And if we don't provide the world with renewable energy, we will continue with fossil energy. And finally, we need to stop we need to save the forest, because now the global biomass is shrinking, and this contributes with 20% of the emissions, 15 to 20%. So if we stopped the deforestation as of now, we would immediately save 20% of the emissions, and we would also protect the biodiversity and the nature.
Absolutely. Well, time is ticking for Earth. And thank you so much, Mr. Svein Tvedt, for joining us and taking out your time.
Thanks for inviting me.
Now, moving on, 14 people have been killed and at least 74 injured after a billboard collapsed during a fierce storm in India's Mumbai. Mumbai witnessed the first rains of the season, accompanied by a massive dust storm. The sudden change in the weather brought traffic to a standstill as commuters took shelter during the storm. The storm uprooted trees and structures and led to power outage in many districts of the financial capital. Local trains, a section of the metro network, and airport services were temporarily halted. The billboard accident occurred opposite a fuel station. The metal frame of the billboard tore through the roof of several cars that were at the fuel station as it came crashing down. The city's municipal corporation issued a statement saying that the billboard was constructed without their permission. A complaint also has been registered against the agency which constructed the billboard, following which the BMC has filed an FIR. The civic body also mentioned that it allows a holding size of a maximum 40 to 40 square feet. However, the hoarding, which collapsed, was of size 120 to 120 square feet. Usually, such pre-monsoon showers bring relief during the summer months, but the ferocity of the winds jolted the city. The weather department is forecasting thunderstorm accompanied by lightning and moderate to intense rain for Mumbai and surrounding areas. A UN report says that the number of global illegal wildlife trade has risen in recent years, and that the progress on measures to end the crime is not on track. The UN report has warned that more than 4,000 species around the world are being targeted by wildlife traffickers, causing untold harm to nature. According to a report from the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, the trade is active in more than 80% of the countries. Researchers looked at more than 140,000 wildlife seizures taking place between 2015 and 2021. They also examined the impacts, trends, and drivers of the trade. As per the report, number of corals, large reptiles like crocodiles and elephants were among the largest of the individual seizures. Seizures were made in 162 countries. Estimates hint that the illegal wildlife trade could be worth $23 billion a year, with more than 100 million plants and animals trafficked annually. Wildlife crime is being driven by demand for medicine, pets, bushmeat, ornamental plants, and trophies. Out of all the mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians seized, 40% were on the red list of the threatened or near-threatened species. Previous research has found that certain populations of spider monkeys and Baird's tapir have declined by 99.9% owing to illegal wildlife trade. Researchers warn that local disappearances could lead to global extinctions. Much wildlife crime is linked to large organized crime groups. Furthermore, corruption plays a critical role in undermining efforts to stop wildlife trafficking, from bribe paid to inspectors to government officials allowing fake permits. Beyond the direct threat to the population of species posed by wildlife trafficking, the crime can also disrupt delicate ecosystems and their functions and processes. This includes their ability to help stabilize the climate and mitigate climate change. And that is all on WION's Climate Tracker.